go ahead and call the meeting to order. If we could, please, let's stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let the board minutes reflect that all members of the board are present. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as proposed.
So moved.
Second.
Dr. McNeil,
Yes.
Ms. McAdams,
Yes.
Ms. Romerman,
Yes.
Mr. Reyes.
Yes.
The chair votes yes as well. Consent agenda. All of the following items, those items of a routine nature normally approved at board meetings, will be approved by one vote unless any board member desires to have a separate vote on any or all of these items. The consent agenda consists of the discussion, consideration, and action on the following items. I believe those are items A through RR.
Move for approval, but I have a tiny question.
Okay,
Second.
let's go for the discussion.
Yeah, item KK, we put some money back from the new golf facility. That was for the outdoor facility, question mark?
Yeah, so when we initially planned the golf facility, there were three phases. Phase one was going to be the practice putting area and the simulator rooms. Phase two was going to be the outdoor green or multiple greens, outdoor hitting, chipping area. And phase three was going to be the restrooms and the bag storage area. So like every other project, our projections 7 years ago were about 25 to 50% low on the cost of this facility. So we decided that we'd go ahead and build in the bathrooms and the locker area and the indoor practice, and then wait until the next bond to see if phase two would go. We felt pretty good about our numbers when we did our estimates. We met with folks at ORU, did a comparison with their facility, which is very similar to what we have inside. And unfortunately, everything just kind of skyrocketed on us. So we hope to go back, and the architecture that Heck and Camper Group were going to provide for us really is going to be a little more extensive than what we now plan on putting out there. So that's why we asked for a deduct, and they didn't finalize that part of the work.
Was that going to be back in by that greenbelt area by the fields?
The thought is that we would move the fence where the old
Ropes.
course was located and extend that out. Kind of calculate we can get about 130 to 140 yard wedge shot. It's really an area we want to create for our middle school kids because nothing personal, but a lot of them just aren't really good. And so for us to go and spend a lot of money and bus them over to a golf course, if we can create a place for them to practice, it's a lot easier for them in terms of travel and also for trying to find a spot. So we're hoping that is going to happen on the next bond, but that is yet to be determined.
So I haven't given up on the idea, but just don't need to spend the money as currently planned. So we have a motion and a second. Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
Ms. Romerman?
Yes.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Chair votes yes as well. Information reports. USPA report. UCTA report.
President Kinnear, Dr. Hartzler, members of the board. Our year is off to a great start. We just wanted to let you know that teachers greatly appreciate the ability to access the buildings at specific times on the weekend. It's eased a lot of stress and tension. I also wanted to report that UCTA is working with OEA to activate our members for the upcoming election, which you guys know the importance of this election. OEA has created opportunities for educators, members and not, to get involved. So we just want to encourage everyone to get in and help get people out to vote at the next election.
Thank you. Under hearings and correspondence, any communications? Opportunity for comments from the audience regarding the agenda. Anyone signed up to speak? Thank you. Under business agenda, instruction, consider and take action on the purchase of the Elevation platform software 2-year subscription and the strategies feature of the Elevation software subscription for the district in the total amount of $226,740.15 from Curriculum Associates LLC using bond funds. Smith.
Good evening, President Kinnear, Dr. Hartzler, members of the board. I am recommending that the Board of Education approve the purchase of the Elevation platform software 2-year subscription and the strategies feature of the Elevation software subscription in the amount of $226,740.15.
Any discussion or questions?
Move for approval. Second.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Ms. Romerman?
Yes.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
Chair votes yes as well. Annual report on college remediation rates. Dr. Moore.
Good evening, Dr. Hartzler, President Kinnear, members of the board. This evening I present the annual remediation report from the Oklahoma State Regents for Higher Education. Submit for your approval. This report is to basically give a barometer of our effectiveness as mandated by Senate Bill 183 from the 1989 legislative session. A couple of highlights from the report here. The main number that we're looking at is a 34.6% remediation rate, which means that 34.6 of our first-time entering students were required to take remedial courses as they entered college. This was a 2.6 increase. It's worth noting there was a year lag in this data. This is reported for participation in remedial classes for the 2020-2021 school year, and it's to be expected. As you remember, the spring of 2020, our students were without the last quarter of instruction, so the 2.6 increase is relatively modest. It compares favorably to several districts in Tulsa County. The other number worth mentioning is the college-going rate. This rate was 509. Of 1,019 of our graduates, 496 in the fall and 509 total entered college for their first year, and that's 50% exactly of our graduates. So that is in line with our mission to get our students college and career ready, assuming that the other half were to attend various vocational schools or enter the workforce. Submit this report for your approval.
So I think, if I recall correctly, and I appreciate the presentation, I don't believe we need to take any action on it, but I think we're welcome to ask any questions or if we've got any discussion we'd like to have on it. All right,
Thank
thank you. Appreciate it. Consider and take action on the 2022-2023 professional development budget and plan. Ms. Gray.
Hello, good evening, President Kinnear, Dr. Hartzler, and members of the board. So I am here to discuss our 2022-23 District Professional Development Plan with hopes that you'll approve it tonight. So we always have a pretty good idea the year before, what we anticipate our district needs are for professional development based on feedback that we received, as well as looking at data. But we did things just a little bit differently this spring. We decided as a district to develop a comprehensive needs assessment that includes all stakeholders in our district. So we have our parents that were included in that comprehensive needs assessment and questions so they could respond, as well as our community partners, and then our certified staff, including our principals and teachers, school psychologists, as well as some of our instructional aides and support staff. We also included in that comprehensive needs assessment a really broad view of all of our funding sources that we have available through federal funds, and asking them for insight and input to not only professional development needs, but other needs that we could fund our needs across the district with. And so, considering our results from the comprehensive needs assessment, in conjunction with our 7 teacher professional development days that are on our calendar, we have developed a plan this year. So August 15th and 16th, as you know, those 2 professional development days, we started off with principals hosted the site-based training and coming back to school, going over procedures, welcoming teachers back. We also had our kickoff, and so that equaled out to be 1 professional development piece, or 1 day, and then the other 2 halves of that day, those 2 days, the afternoon, was for teacher work day and preparation in the classroom. Looking at September 6th, let's see, October 24th, I've got these all memorized, January 17th, February 21st, and then April 10th. So 3 of those days are district professional development days on the calendar, and 2 are virtual. But what we're doing for those 5 days is we are taking 3 hours, half of that time, for teacher collaboration, because we know that our teachers continue to ask for that time, and they need it, and then the other half of that is for professional development. 3 of those days are dedicated to district-led professional development, while 2 of those days are dedicated to site-based professional development, where the principals work with their staffs to determine what that need is, or the directors work with their appropriate departments. This year, secondary is taking that district-led professional development and focusing on content training. So taking that concept of teacher clarity that I presented at the last board meeting in August, with the lesson design, student feedback, student engagement, and they're taking it to another level that really allows teachers to plan for the content appropriately. And so we pull like all the science teachers together, all the social studies teachers together, and so forth. At the elementary level, a big focus of ours is supporting our teachers through the new ELA curriculum adoption and having our vendors come in, or consultants come in to train us on the curriculum and make sure our teachers are well equipped for appropriate implementation. And then on top of that, for both elementary and secondary, we have English learner professional development. So we work on building teacher capacity through strategies for student discourse, levels of questioning depending on the language level of the students. And then we also have ongoing professional development throughout the year that support the needs of our district, just outside of even those 7 teacher development days. So one thing that I would like to let you know of is our increase in teacher stipend for professional development. So at the end of May, we made a decision as a district to increase the amount of stipend pay that our teachers would get for professional development. So for example, in the past several years, we've been able to pay teachers $60 a day, whether they attended 4 hours of professional development or 6 hours. So essentially, it was like $15 an hour for up to a cap of $60 a day. We increased that to say that we would really like to honor our teachers and their time, as well as help with those expenses that are involved in childcare when you have to attend professional development. So we actually pay a teacher professional development stipend now for $20 an hour, and we don't cap out. So for example, in the past, a teacher attending a 6-hour training might have made $60 in a stipend, whereas now they will actually receive $120. So it's a very nice incentive for teachers. We, of course, as a result of that, have seen our figures increase with the funding. And then we also have to keep in mind with the recent negotiations for TRS and the increase up to 3%, we are budgeting some extra money for the 3% stipends and what we pay for fringes and benefits. As a reminder, this is our final, next to final year. Going into the 2023-24 school year will be our final year of ESSER funding. And so we really do encourage our schools to really consider what are our professional development needs that we really could afford to get some help with, such as teacher clarity. So I'm happy to report tonight we've onboarded 3 extra schools compared to last month when I was able to present, starting second semester though. And so we've got 12 of our sites in our district that will be getting support this year, and we anticipate to add that support next year. So we're really looking at a budget of $1,125,000, just a little bit over, just to approximate what we will spend in professional development to support our teachers and support staff. Can I answer any questions? Okay, thank you guys.
Well, I think we do need to take action on this one, correct? So I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
Ms. Romerman?
Yes.
Chair votes yes as well.
Thank you.
Consider and take action on the revisions to the Gifted Educational Plan and Program Monitoring Document. Dr. Nelson.
Yes, President Kinnear, Dr. Hartzler, and the board. Before you tonight regarding the Gifted Educational Plan. Every 2 or 3 years, we tend to bring a revision to the plan, usually around either the way we identify gifted students or how we provide those services to gifted students. In this case, it has to do with the identification process. And what we're proposing is that the wording allows for a greater breadth of criteria in our multi-criteria identification. There are 2 categories of gifted. The single criterion, which is the assessment of intellectual abilities, a score of 97th percentile or higher. That won't change. That's a state regulation. But the state allows a lot of approaches toward the multi-criterion identification of gifted students. And we're really just broadening the way that we identify that second category by articulating, particularly in elementary, this isn't changing secondary. Actually came just a couple years ago and altered secondary a little bit in order to make sure we were identifying enough students. Some of this has to do with the assessments we use as well, but in the elementary area, isolating the academic giftedness a little bit more by putting the grades along with the norm referenced assessment like STAR, math, or reading, and separating that from the intellectual ability. And then we also added, you'll probably notice in this matrix form that has been developed, some areas of advocacy, and those have to do with conditions in the student's life that tend to have a diminishing effect on assessment data. And so, and including advocating as well for underrepresented students in our gifted and talented education data. So I want to emphasize that that doesn't necessarily state which aspect of race or ethnicity that the student has to be. It's when we look at our current gifted data, if students are underrepresented in a significant way, then a little bit of advocacy points are included in the calculation. It's not enough to identify a student as gifted, but it may be just enough to tip the scale in cases where, for example, economic hardship and other factors that affect students, like learning another language. All of these, there's plenty of evidence, including in our data, that show that the students tend to score lower on tests of intellectual ability and other academic achievement as well when those conditions apply to their current situation as a student. So taking all of that into consideration, another thing I'd want to point out is that these changes really won't prevent a student who would be identified as gifted under the current plan and the current identification process from being identified. It actually probably will catch then some more students in the process, which is a good thing, and we think that it's appropriate. So this approach has been vetted through a pilot process. We used it alongside of our current process through this spring and have looked at impact data to see how it would affect our current gifted student population as we, if we were to transition to it, and feel pretty good about where we are. The gifted plan, as it's stated, doesn't mandate every detail on this matrix, so it allows us to still edit some of the factors on the matrix if we need to make adjustments. And we'll do that, of course, with the Gifted Local Advisory Committee in consultation, and they have been as well in the development of this process. So maybe said a little more than you were interested in hearing, but it does represent a good step. None of the concepts or ideas on this matrix are new to gift identification nationally or even in our state. Other districts have been using these a matrix style where we had a checklist style before. We've taken this step, I believe, in a careful manner, and you know, I'd like to say probably a little better than some others have done it. But you know, that's the union way. So
have, I know we're approving it as part of the plan tonight, but have you already have students identified waiting for approval?
well, this is the season for gifted identification. So upon the approval of the change in the plan, we would then use the matrix for Category 2 elementary and move forward with that, yes. If the plan wasn't approved, we would just use our current criteria, which would still identify a substantial number of gifted students as usual. So.
Move for approval.
Second. One more question. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Once the students have been identified, has there been a pilot downstream too to see how we might empower those students who have been found through this new process, like academic success and economic hardship, to find a way to be able to bolster that other section too? Or is that still in planning? I guess once I am identified as gifted, but this is an area that I've always been seen as a struggle, so I've never been identified as gifted before. Are there things to allow this to become a strength once I'm in the gifted program?
Yes, so what we expect, because even though this will broaden some opportunities for some students that, let's say, that have economic hardship, we currently have some students we've already identified with those characteristics. And so what we find is that those students have always had the need to be enriched, but there's a certain arbitrary nature to an identification process when we're using calculations and subjective inventories that go into that. And so those students have always been out there. They always need enrichment, whether they're in the regular classroom or whether they're pulled out into a special environment. So I believe we're prepared to capitalize on that. I think they will rise to the occasion when they're in the environment and challenged with the expectation that they can live up to the gifts that they have. That's our anticipation, but certainly we'll be looking for ways to undergird and support as necessary. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So on the test data, do you have a general idea of how many more students we might be able to include in this category? 5%, 10%?
That's a good question. So I am going to estimate from visual impact data, it will probably be closer to 5%. It's not a dramatic shift. And it actually is looking like we'll have students at all schools added in numbers as well. I mean, and by doing that, yeah.
Any other questions, comments, discussion? I think we've got a motion and a second. Am I correct on that? Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Ms. Romerman?
Yes.
Chair votes yes.
Thank you.
Under Personnel, consider and take action on the third renewal agreement with CARE ATC to provide national shared site clinic services to union PPO employees. Mr. Logan.
Thank you, President Kinnear, Dr. Hartzler, members of the board. CARE ATC has been a wonderful provider for us for our clinic services for our employees. They are providing a renewal for us with no increases for access to their clinics, which our employees utilize for zero copay and can leave with generic medications at no cost. And we ask that you renew this contract for us.
Move for approval.
Before they increase the fee.
Second.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
Ms. Romerman?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Consider and take action on an agreement for insurance management services with Rooney Insurance Agency for employee benefit consulting services beginning January 1, 2023, and authorize Jay Logering, Executive Director of Human Resources, to execute the agreement and authorize payments pursuant to the agreement.
Thank you, President Kinnear. Once again, Rooney Insurance has been an incredible partner for us. Sandra Callahan is here to actually help answer if there's any questions on the next subject. But they do propose their contract again with no increase to their services. And they've been an incredible partner in all the years I've been here with the district, and I know many more before that, and providing great benefits and support for our employees.
Move for approval.
Second.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Ms. Romerman?
Yes.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Consider and take action on the administrative services agreement with United Healthcare, UMR, to become the health plan third-party administrator and approval of the monthly premium rates for employee, retiree, board members, and COBRA participants for the district's self-insured PPO medical indemnity plans, and to approve the plans, plan changes, other coverages, and administrative services, including all associated agreements, contracts at the cost outlined in the board memo and attachments, effective January 1, 2023, and authorize Executive Director of Human Resources as the superintendent's designee to sign the associated contracts, and that the board authorize the issuance of POs and payment thereof.
Very well done. I'll have to work on shortening that in the future. This is our big benefits contract renewal. As we talked about in the subcommittee, business subcommittee, we are requesting a change of our third-party provider. Last year, we did make a change to community care. While community care did provide us some cost savings, the struggles for our employees we felt was too great for their needs being met in an effective way that we call union. We have pride in our benefits, and community care was just not up to the level that we needed them to be to provide third-party services for us. So with that, we're looking to make a move back to United Healthcare. United Healthcare has come back with a quote for us, which is actually lower in the monthly cost for us than community care would have been this year. So with that, we will be able to go back to the previous networks that we had, and employees will have much greater access to the services. Some other changes as we discussed. I know there's a lot of information in this. We are looking to increase the employee rates as well as what the district provides in additional costs in paying for these services, as well as the FBA increase. The state did finally increase the insurance rates, which we were very happy to see, which has been many years in the coming. They've tended to steal their own money from themselves and not increase, which has negatively impacted us. So with that, we're looking at a 5% increase in rates for our employees for the employee cost. The district is also increasing what we're paying out for each individual plan. On the dental plan, we are also increasing rates slightly. Even though it's a 5 and a 10% increase for the base and the buy-up plans, those are much less expensive, so the total increase is in the single dollars generally per month. It's not a large increase. All of our other benefits are essentially remaining the same. There's no additional cost for the life insurance and all the other additional benefits that we offer. The vision plan, everything will still be available to our employees, as well as all the optional insurances that they're able to purchase through our various providers, and those are all coming in at no increase for our employees. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. I know it's a lot of information. We will be doing open enrollment starting in October for all of our employees. We'll be doing lots of Zoom meetings for our employees. And then we will have our health fair October 5th at the UMAC from noon to 6, with a lot of our services out there for employees and for people to get flu shots as well.
Yeah.
What was the state FBA previously?
The state FBA previously was, it was $615 and change. It went up almost $25 a person, up to $640. So that was
And did we change what we pay?
what we pay as the district.
Yeah, did you say 5%?
Yeah, the employee's cost is going up 5%. Though the updated one for the employee. The district is paying an additional almost $8 per person per month for every plan. In addition to that, for those costs each month as well.
So I think for clarification, that it is the district is increasing their contribution, their payment, and in addition to that, not net of that, but in addition, there'll be a 5% increase for the employees.
That's correct, yes. The district's increasing their amount, the state FBA did go up, and employees will be paying a little bit more as well. Unfortunately, medical costs,
Right.
as you know, have been out of control. Sandra and her group do a great job trying to help us, but there's little you can do when they get a new drug that runs $15,000 per month.
But with that comes a change in the service provider, more options than what we're had.
That's correct. This service provider has many more options and a much broader network for all of our employees. And our prescription group will still remain the same. They have done a great job for us, Medalist, and their costs have actually decreased slightly in their monthly costs just due to their programs.
Any other questions?
Move for approval.
Second.
Ms. Romerman?
Yes.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Chair votes yes as well. Thank you. Under School Operations, consider and take action on an agreement with KSQ Design for architectural design services related to the 6th, 7th grade center renovation project in the amount of $459,000 from bond funds. Mr. Isaacs.
Yes, good evening, Dr. Hartzler, President Kinnear, members of the board. With your approval tonight, this will be the first phase of an architectural design or a study. This will be similar to a study of what we can do to actually renovate the 6th and 7th grade center. It's going to be in depth in terms of it'll have mechanical engineers involved, structural engineers involved, some communication specialists. So we're getting into the kind of the nitty-gritty of what we could possibly do when we get ready to design the renovation of the facility. We'll also study schematics that we've looked at in the last 3 or 4 months with the principals and the teaching and learning and determine which of those concepts are constructible. So we look at doing this probably, the schedule for this is probably through December of this year, maybe January, and we should have, hopefully we'll have our concept and our plan, and we can move forward. We think right now we've budgeted about $45 million for the project, and we hope we can stay within that budget. We're trying. There's a lot of need in the facility. It needs an air conditioning system, an updated air conditioning system. It needs updates everywhere. We want to remodel restrooms, move restrooms around, change the programming of it a little bit for 6th and 7th grade. So a lot of working parts. So we're looking forward to getting started, and there will be a follow-on design package when we have the next bond. So, any questions?
Entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
Ms. Romerman?
Yes.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
And Chair votes yes.
Thank you.
Under Finance, consider and take action on the estimate of needs document for the 2022-2023 fiscal year as required by state law for submission to the County Excise Board and authorize the Board President to sign the final documents. Dr. Williams.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board, and Dr. Hartzler. Tonight, we bring the estimate of needs to the board for approval and filing with the County Excise Board. The document that was included in your packet was prepared by an external audit firm locally over in Broken Arrow, Bledsoe, Hewitt, and Gullickson. They've done this for us for a number of years. A couple of things I wanted to point out. I won't go through the entire document, but the estimate of needs sets the legal appropriation limit for the Board of Education. So there is a ceiling that the board cannot approve a budget above. That is located back on page 54, and for the general fund, that limit, for example, is $162,154,101. Of course, the budget that we will be bringing you this evening is well within that limit, and we always keep our budgets within these limits. The other thing that I pointed out in the cover memo is that this year we did receive some favorable news on the district's net assessed valuation. Our NAV grew by just under 5%, which was a welcome rate of growth. And that resulted in our sinking fund millage going down just a tad to 28.62 mils. As I discussed with the business subcommittee, we've also had some other good news about the district's property values with the addition of the sporting goods store that's coming into Woodland Hills Mall, and hopefully more development in that corridor will certainly help us. With this growth in the NAV, we were able to relook at our projections for a possible 5-year bond series coming up, and that we were able to enlarge that from $150 million to $152 million. So that it certainly came at a good time and will help us out. Be glad to answer any questions.
So my simple understanding of the needs assessment is it essentially becomes the budget plus the fund balance that
That's-
ensures we do not go over that cap by doing that.
Excellent.
Okay. Questions, comments, discussion? Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Ms. Romerman?
Yes.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Chair votes yes as well. Consider and take action on the general Building and Child Nutrition Fund operational budgets for the 2022-2023 fiscal year as outlined on the statements of revenues, expenditures, and fund balances. Dr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Kinnear. This evening, we're bringing to the board recommendations for the general fund, building fund, and child nutrition fund annual operating budgets for the 22-23 fiscal year. And although we joke a lot about the length of the budget presentation and the detail and lots of numbers, there is an awful lot of work that happens behind the scenes for this to come together. And I'd like to recognize Becky Byers, who is in the audience tonight. She is the Director over Treasury, Financial Reporting and Budget, and Valerie Bobrink, who is our brand new this year manager who oversees the budget department. So they did a terrific job and put a lot of work into this evening. Also, I'd like to thank my assistant Letha for helping me with the technology tonight. So what we start with, and you should have at your seat packet, a smaller packet that includes all the slides that I'll walk through this evening. The first thing we have is a recap of revenues and expenditures in the general fund, and summarizing what is being proposed this evening, and also providing an update on our actual final results from 21-22. I'll delve into the revenue side and the expenditure side of the equation in a little more detail, but I did want to point out that we ended the most recent fiscal year with a fund balance of $16,134,557 in the general fund. That was at 11.82% of revenue. Of course, that formerly that limit was 14%. It's now been increased to 17%. So the district is well within that limit. Based on our budget that we're bringing this evening, we are projecting an ending fund balance, and I add a caveat that we are very conservative on the revenue side as well as the expenditure side. We want to under-forecast revenue and over-forecast expenditures, and that's kind of how the approach we like to take. But based on this forecast, we would end this current fiscal year with an ending fund balance in the general fund of $15.7 million, or about 11.15% of revenue. Going to the next slide, this simply presents the revenue information for the general fund. A couple of things I will point out. We did incorporate the ad valorem growth from the increase to the tax base in our revenue projection, but we also included the increase to our chargeables in the state aid formula. So as you all know who have been on the board for a while, in the general fund, the growth that we receive in ad valorem, we lose in state aid. So we have that and other chargeables that will be affected on our midterm adjustment. On the other local sources, we had a slight decrease, and that was the result of several grants. A couple of them came to an end, and one was reduced. But I think this evening the big story in the general fund continues to be our federal programs. The ESSER funds, which continue to provide an invaluable resource to our district. We expect to have revenues in federal sources of about $23.5 million. If you compare that to just a few short years ago, where our federal revenue was around $8 or $9 million, you can imagine the impact that this has had on our district. It has been substantial all the way around. The next slide highlights the changes that I've kind of just reviewed from the temporary appropriation budget. As I mentioned, the gain in ad valorem is updated to reflect our current NAV. Some of our local programs that we had a decrease in are itemized there. We had a small increase in overall state aid, and an increase in other state aid sources. As Mr. Logering mentioned, the flex benefit allowance increase that will come into play in January is included in our current allocations. And the big increase, of course, is in federal revenues. This has been a very, very important resource for the district. When you look at the pie chart where we normally don't have a lot of change from one year to the other in terms of the overall general fund revenue, you see again where federal revenue is 17% of the total. A more typical number there, I looked back a couple of years, it's been consistently at 8%. So again, the same pattern that we see throughout the budget, really, in the general fund. The next chart is a little bit busy, but it shows a comparison of the various revenue categories over 6 years. And so when you stack them up kind of next to each other, you can really see what changes from one year to the next. You can see that, again, when you look over to federal sources, I feel like a broken record here. Federal revenue is where we see the growth for the district this year. The next table is really a great tool that we use a lot. This is how we track our state aid allocations over the years. And you can see that with this year's FY23 allocation down at the bottom, we did see that drop in our ADM. So our membership went down to 14,925.59. That's a reflection of the students that we lost in FY20. So with the change in the law on state aid, as well as we would have been at that 2-year mark anyway, so we would have seen that reduction this year regardless. But we did see a pretty hefty drop in our ADM and accordingly in our weighted ADM. When you kind of look at this over time, you can see that this year with an allocation of about $48,040,000, we are still below FY20 in state aid. So we were talking in the business subcommittee about the lack of operational funds that the state has provided year after year after year. And so that when we do see increases, for example, in fuel cost, which has had a dramatic effect on our budget, there is no funding from the state to help schools cover those costs. So those operational funds get stretched thinner and thinner. The next chart shows our flex benefit allowance, which we just talked about briefly. What I'll point out here that I think is an important story to tell is if you look under the 21-22 box on the right, you can see that we had of the 1,910 employees, we had 1,710 who were taking insurance. So they're enrolled in the district's insurance plan, and only 200 employees elect to take the waiver. So we do require that they carry other health insurance, so it may be provided through a spouse's employment or some other source. But it's always nice to see our own employees signing on and joining our health program, health insurance. With respect to the expenditure budget, we talk about expenditures two ways, by function and by object. Function is the purpose of the expense. And we are required, of course, to report that to the state and classify expenditures according to the OCAS system. The increases that you see here are a result of negotiated agreements for this year, changes to those agreements, and of course increased in federal spending. So those expenditures are spread across, but primarily focused on the area of instruction. The new positions for this year, and I'd like to spend a little time on this one because there's kind of multi-layers. We always want to be very clear and transparent about the positions that have been added and reflected in this budget for this year. And this year we had a total of 43 new positions. We had 19 teachers, and of those 19 teachers, 17 are grant funded, primarily through ESSER. The classroom aides, all 19 of those new positions are grant funded. We did make the decision to add one administrator as Mr. Federline moved into his new role, and Dr. Moore stepped into the secondary executive director slot, so that resulted in one position being added there. And then we had 4 other positions. 3 of those were grant funded. So The vast majority of new positions were funded primarily through ESSER grant funds. At the same time, on the other side of the equation, we held a significant number of positions vacant due to our reduction in students and state aid accordingly. Those positions that were held vacant included 24 teachers, 20 EDP staff, 11 aides, 3 in finance, 2 in HR, and 1 in transportation. So on the one hand, we held positions vacant. On the other hand, with grant funds, we were able to add some positions. However, you know, we all know those grant funds are coming to an end. So one of the things that Sherry Fair and I are going to be working on diligently come the spring semester is our plan to transition those grant positions down because that funding will come to its conclusion. Those are all referenced positions in the general fund. In the building fund, we did add 3 custodial positions. We knew that we needed, with the new band fine arts building, that we would need to provide additional staff over there. And so those 3 custodian positions are paid through the building fund. Any questions so far?
Yeah, the number of vacant positions, 24 teachers, 20, is that support services?
The 24, we decided to hold those 24 teaching positions open because of the number of students.
Right, but just in the totals, 24 teachers, was it, and then there was 20?
20 EDP.
EDP, thank you.
11 aides, 3 finance, 2 HR, and 1 transportation.
Thank you.
Sure. When we look at the expenditure budget by function, we continue to see that the vast majority of the district's budget is dedicated to instruction and instructional support areas. So if you look at the large green section, that is 55%. Instruction refers to expenditures associated directly with classrooms. Not principals, not principal secretaries. It is teachers, aides, textbooks, classroom expenses. Likewise, student support includes things like counselors, psychologists, the things that are ancillary to instruction but very, very important. And then instructional support is our media, libraries, our professional development, all of the things that we do to build on instruction. So between those 3 areas, you see that we spend about 68% or 2/3 of the district's budget on instruction or instruction-related areas. When we look at the expenditure budget by object, you can see the impact of the grant positions that we have added, as well as the negotiated agreements that we reached with both of our unions. And so those are the increases that you see on the expenditure side, primarily in the salary and benefit areas. And then likewise, when you look at the general fund broken down by object, of course, the biggest pieces are salaries and benefits, which is the case for all schools. In our case, our salaries and benefits represent about 89% of the general fund, about $126 million every year. So that's why we spend a lot of time working on staffing and making sure we are tracking those dollars and positions correctly. Before I move on to the building fund, are there any questions I can answer? The building fund, as we mentioned earlier, is a little over $5 million in revenue and expenses. The building fund is pretty much solely reliant on ad valorem, on the 5 mills that is apportioned over to the building fund, and interest earnings that accrue. In the building fund, now, we are all staff, all the time, and we have moved our property and casualty insurance over to the general fund. What has happened over the last few years with our interest rates being unbelievably low is we have continued to see a dip in that building fund balance. I'm hopeful that as the Fed takes action on interest rates, and we are beginning to see increasing interest rates on our investments, but they have been down for a very, very long time. We expect that based on our projected revenue and expenditures, we'll end the year with about a 4.2 million fund balance in the building fund. And that's very important in the building fund because we rely on that for cash flow. Since we don't collect ad valorem taxes until January, we have to be able to pay bills starting in on July 1st. As I mentioned on the pie chart, you can see the building fund is all salaries and benefits. There are 149 full-time employees that are paid through the building fund. That is 108 custodians, 3 building engineers, and 16 security personnel within our security department. So to give you an idea of how that is broken down. The Child Nutrition Fund continues to be a bright spot for us financially. They ended the year with a fund balance of $10.67 million. We are working diligently with Lisa Griffin and Mr. Bushyhead to map out a plan to spend some of that balance down. And we have targeted the 6th and 7th grade project to include some renovation monies through the Child Nutrition Fund for the cafeterias and kitchen. The child nutrition budget is made up of basically food, cleaning supplies, paper cost, and people. So the child nutrition department includes about 180 full-time employees. So it is a large, complicated operation, as Ms. Griffin has told us on several occasions, and it is. And that concludes the information I have to cover the budget, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
A couple of questions and a couple of observations.
Okay.
On the Child Nutrition Fund, the level of federal sources down from the prior year.
Yes.
Do we look at this level now as more of a recurring number for federal?
What we expect to see is for our revenue and child nutrition to return to more of a normal pattern. You know, for the 2.5 years of the pandemic, we had the federal free lunch program that allowed us to feed students free of charge. Now we're going back to our regular, standard, either the student pays or they are available under the free and reduced program through the.
So as opposed to everybody having
Correct.
the free, it's now the
Correct, and that's
qualification
why
that
you
it
see
was.
the change there in child
Okay,
nutrition.
all right. Well, go ahead.
Dr. Williams, could you for the board and also for our public expand a little bit more on our challenge right now, not only in Union Public Schools, but in terms of public schools, the 510 schools that we have throughout the state of Oklahoma, in that our operational dollars and where we find ourselves when we talk about we are struggling in terms of per pupil funding. Talk to us about if we were just funded at the regional average, how much more new money Union Public Schools would receive each and every year.
I'd be glad to. In fact, I could talk at length about that. But the sad fact is that operational funding in Oklahoma has lagged our surrounding states and the country for many years. However, as those other states have increased educational funding, Oklahoma has not, and we are at the very bottom of the list. In fact, when you compare our funding, our per pupil spending in Oklahoma to our 6 surrounding states, I think it's $1,537 per pupil less than the average. If we were to receive that $1,537 per pupil, in 1 year, that would be $23.6 million. So that gives us a sense of how very far behind our state is with funding, not only for teacher salaries, but for all operational costs, utilities, fuel, insurance, all the other things that districts have to pay for. We have fallen far behind where we need to be.
We are, by last observation, 47th in the nation in terms of per pupil funding, and obviously last in our region. And that's something that we need to, as a state, address post-haste.
Absolutely. I might also add that this is a year of record revenue collections. And it would be nice to see some of that flow to common education. And I'll stop there.
Well, some observations you made, recurring themes about the substantial amount of federal revenue. I think the underlying comment that you didn't make was the need for state funding to replace that, or at a minimum pick up the difference from what is a recurring expected to the level that we currently have. Add to that, as I see, the inflationary cost of support services, the fact that property and casualty insurance is now added to the general fund, and those costs are only going up. Just continues to create additional burdens on the overall general budget. And I say that with my hats off to all of you for the way that you continue to manage this.
Thank you.
Being on top of it, looking at trends, knowing where current monies are, and how to plan that for the future as well.
And also that the federal money that's about to go, we've overwhelmingly spent that on support for our students to make up for learning loss.
Yes, ma'am.
And we've seen some gains with that, and that, is soon to disappear as well.
You're absolutely right. Through this federal money, we have been able to offer robust summer programming for our students, extensive tutoring, extensive remediation to help our students get back where they need to be after the pandemic.
Any other questions, comments, discussion? Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Ms. Romerman?
Yes.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
Chair votes yes as well.
Thank you.
Any new business? I assume no new business. Opportunities for comments from the audience and board members. Anyone signed up? Board members, Dr. Hartzler, any comments you all would like to make?
Off to a great start. Thank all of our support personnel, certified personnel. Really, truly, I think in our walkthrough is a great start to the school year. It's nice to kind of be back to some normalcy, and we just hope that we can continue to do that.
I would like to say, I don't think Emily is here tonight, but hats off to her and her staff, and Charlie and his staff. Friday night was a lot of fun. That was a beautiful night with a lot of working parts, and it was just a really great event.
And I will add to that to Dr. Moore and Dr. Federline, soon to be at some point, and others for. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for that to be pressure. But also to operations for the game management changes from our first home game to the second one. Kudos to everyone involved in that. I heard a lot of positive things about the changes that were made. So I think we've just got to figure out how we can expedite the concession orders, Dr. McCready, kind of in your area here with the band, and we'll keep working on that, but great changes. So.
Very good. Entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Dr. McNeil,
Yes.
Ms. McAdams.
Yes.
Ms. Romerman. Mr. Reyes.
Yes.
Chair votes yes, and we are adjourned.